राइट भन्ने आफ्नो प्रोजेक्टको बारेमा सेयर गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ। यो चाहिँ अलिकति पर्सनल पनि छ, किन चाहिँ उहाँ चाहिँ आफ्नो प्राइमेरी केयर गिभर पनि हो। उहाँ चाहिँ आफ्नो हजुरआमा र आमाको लागि उहाँको अहिले पर्सनल अलिकति हिस्ट्री उहाँले आफै आफ्नो इन्ट्रोडक्सनमा दिनुहुन्छ होइन लुइस। सो यु क्यान अल्सो टक अबाउट यर बिङ प्राइमेरी केयर गिभर टु यर मदर एन्ड ग्रान्ड मदर। सो यति भन्दै म यो अहिले यो फ्लोर चाहिँ म हाम्रो लुईलाई दिन्छु। सो लुई
Dhanyavad, namaste, thank you, Bihani and the team for allowing me to present. So as she mentioned, this year I've been traveling to different countries, understanding a bit more about what it means to age in different countries. So the talk today is called Innovative Long-Term Care Worldwide. And to start, I'll start from the personal story. So as she mentioned, I was the primary caregiver of my mother and grandmother, who both suffered from Alzheimer's disease. My mother passed away when she was 53 and my grandmother when she was 84. And although I was born in the United States, they only spoke Spanish and are Ecuadorian. And because of this, I saw firsthand how there was barriers for them accessing healthcare and always needing a translator basically. And this made me very passionate to understand what is happening in other countries and how are they upholding one's culture and religious background, because in the United States, unfortunately, with the diverse population that we have, we don't recognize the diversity of our country. And because of that, I proposed a project before that, I wanted to ask a question. When you think about a care home, what images pop into your mind? You know, when you go to a care home, do you think about having the ability to roam freely, a garden, able to do things on your own? This man, for example, is shaving himself. Are we allowing people to do things on their own? Are we creating festivals, gatherings for them to be able to do? Are they able to go to a show if they desire to? Or how are we bringing theater within these care homes? Is there a park? Are you able to play basketball or other types of games within these care homes? Are you fostering community, and what does community look like within that care home? Are you creating meaningful friendships? Is there a store so you're able to purchase certain things? Are you able to decorate the space the way you desire? And most of all, are you being heard? So these are some photos of what I captured this year traveling to different countries and understanding what exactly it means to age there. And that allowed me to pursue the Watson Fellowship, which is funding me to carry out this project and understanding different countries and what's happening with our seniors here. This photo, for example, she's a woman who has Alzheimer's disease, and she's able to paint. She painted all those paintings there. And this care home gave her the space and opportunity to do so. Typically, when you enter a facility or an institution, you are stripped away from certain liberties. And here, this care home reimagined the space to be able to give her this to ensure she's able to paint. And because of that, I originally proposed 5 countries to Watson Foundation. So the ones that are started these, that's my original 5 countries, but I ended up going to 10 countries. I'm currently here in Nepal, and after Nepal I'll be heading to Australia, but this is just some of the countries that I've been able to travel to. And the reason I started off in Ecuador was because my family is from there, so I was interested in knowing a bit more about the Ecuadorian culture and what exactly that entails. So here in Ecuador, older persons tend to live at home with their family. And the one thing that I noticed immediately was the difference between food culture. And what I mean by that is that it's very common in Latin America, especially in Ecuador, to have a first plate and a second plate. The first plate would typically be some type of soup and then having rice. In the United States, it's not like that. We just have one meal. We also don't have too much dessert, but here it was very important. And across all the care homes I visited there, they had that food culture embedded there, as well as the structural design. Every care home that I went to, public or private, had this idea of openness. Having a garden, how are we integrating nature within these spaces, as well as religion and traditions. Ecuador is a highly Catholic country, and across the board, every institution respected that religion background. And it was interesting because Ecuador was the first country where I also saw someone from the United States, and they decided to move there despite not speaking Spanish because of how much it costs. Because in the United States it's very expensive and they're not able to afford a care home there. And I'll play this video for you to see this care home. It's a private care home, but you are able to see the importance of nature and having this open space where people are able to roam around. And it was really nice because it's been scientifically proven when you are able to roam around, it reduces agitation and anxiety amongst older persons suffering from some type of neurodegenerative disease. So you're able to see, you know, this open field right there. I'm just like walking around, but the care home is down over there, and they have plans to expand on the other hill, creating smaller homes, etc. But this is I would say on a smaller scale end, because here, this care home, which was run by the nuns, it had over 100 older persons. It was a bit difficult, but important to have certain spaces like these. And after Ecuador, I went to Peru. And in Peru, I was working with, again, a very Catholic country. And here I was working in care homes that were run by the Catholic Church and the nuns specifically. And what was really interesting about these care homes, again, this idea of creating open spaces where they're able to go out and feel the weather was very important to them. And specifically here, thinking about how are we reimagining these spaces to mimic society. So this care home had their own barber shop. Here's me shaving this person's face because his beard was growing. And it was so important to have this experience because a lot of these older men were saying how the nuns would typically give 2 to 5 minutes. Whenever they would visit, whenever I was there, I would take around 20 to 30 minutes with every person. So ensuring that we're really providing a person-centered care or providing attention to these individuals. And I understand that there's a shortage within the care staff industry, but how are we bringing in volunteers? For example, I couldn't support them financially, but what I could support them with is my time and resources. So I would come in here and basically do that. As well as in this picture, I was providing physical therapy. So I'm not a physical therapist, however, I was assisting the physical therapist who was there in doing some type of physical activities that anyone can do. If I'm going to, throw a ball, anyone could throw a ball. Just because I have the title of being a physical therapist, it shouldn't change if somebody else can do it as well. And another thing that I appreciated was also these seniors here, for example, are a special group of people where all of them were abandoned by their children. In the other care home, there was a mix of abandonment, but for the most part, they had the children. But these residents here, they had children, but they were all abandoned because of the economic instability that these people face in Peru. But it was so beautiful to see how resilient they were and how they were trying to find happiness with the environment that they had. And here I dressed up as Mickey Mouse for a celebration of birthdays and just like a farewell party with them. But it was so crucial and important because I also speak Spanish to understand how are we communicating. And it was interesting because this is the first care home where I saw residents actually having responsibilities. When you think about entering an institution, you think about everything needing to be done with you. But our seniors sometimes are not looking for everything to be done for them, but be assisted with. And what I mean by that, for example, if I spend my entire life cooking and I enjoy cooking, just because I'm an older person, it might not change my passions. I still might be able to cook, but the care home would not invite me typically to the kitchen to assist cooking. But in this care home, that was exactly what occurred. And it was so incredible to see those barriers be broken down, because in countries like the United States, it's very difficult to do that or want to do that. It would typically not be allowed. Just here are some more videos of my time in Peru. As I mentioned, I was working with the nuns. And here's a video of this one resident that I really enjoyed, Miss Carmen. And this care home did not have an activities coordinator. Because of the pandemic, they closed off everything to the outside. I was allowed to be there though. And it was so interesting when I put on some music and said, okay, we're going to dance now. I was doing some American dances, and then I told them to show me some of typical Peruvian dance. I don't necessarily think this is typical Peruvian dance, but it was so beautiful to see her dance. And I'll play it for you all to see. So we're able to see, when we give our seniors our space, we're able to really see what they are able to do. We're able to collaborate with them to produce something like this and see their creativity. Another thing I wanted to mention was that this care home potentially isn't structurally the best. However, how to reimagine these spaces to be more meaningful. In Peru, it's a very sunny country, and they didn't necessarily have a roof, but they had these little nets to ensure that there's some shade so the seniors would still be able to go outside. And some people might say, it needs some structural improvements, which I would agree, but thinking about, what is important in terms of the structure and in terms of the quality of care we're providing to our seniors. And the nuns here were a very incredible group of caregivers and sisters because it was 11 nuns for 100 residents. And it was incredible to hear their stories and how resilient they were because of their faith and belief in God, and how their religion empowered them to continue moving forward, because it was a very difficult job for the nuns, but they were very strategic to do so. And it's interesting because some of the nuns, for example, this nun, Sister Angelica, she was on the older side, but was still giving back to the seniors because of her devotion for community and faith. So after Peru, I ended up going to Argentina. I did not have Argentina planned out, but I'm so happy I went to Argentina because Argentina, I would say, in terms of Latin American countries that I've traveled to, is a leader in the sense that their governments, at least in the capital city, because until you leave outside the capital city, it's a whole different story. But in the capital city, all throughout the capital city, there are day centers for free provided to older adults. Depending on the neighborhood you live in, you would be able to go into that neighborhood. Additionally, there's lots of public parks. So every Monday through Friday, these public parks would be hosting some activities for older adults to participate in. And that was something very interesting because, for example, where I live, there's a park. I never see seniors there. I never see somebody spearheading any community events focused on older persons, but it's a very large park and space that people can use, but we're simply not using it enough. So here in Argentina, I was very surprised by that, as well as how the government has 4 care homes, and they used to be hospitals. Again, they reimagined this hospital into a care home. And I'm going to show this video of this Jewish day center. This is, I would say, and this is the public, priority by the government. I think the government day centers can improve, but nonetheless, it's important that they have this space for seniors to meet up, collaborate, and build community. So this is a video of the Jewish day center in Argentina. So it was really nice to see this and people collaborating and hearing their stories about how important it was for them to have this space, because during the pandemic they didn't have this space and a lot of them felt like they were lost from community and they needed that. Another interesting thing about here in Argentina was I was volunteering in this one care center where I was doing activities, and for the first time ever, a group of seniors said, "Luis, I don't like the song you're playing. I don't like these activities." And on my end, this was interesting because in Ecuador and Peru, everyone enjoyed those activities. And what I learned from that experience is that as an activities coordinator or as someone who's entering these care homes, I should be asking our seniors what they want to do. I shouldn't be assuming what they want to do. Just because I like listening to Spanish lullabies, it doesn't mean every senior enjoys doing that. And sometimes our staff takes it personally. So how are we empowering our staff to not take these comments personally, but to really collaborate and create community with our seniors? And another thing that I find very important by the Argentinian government is that they spearheaded a gerontological sexual health talk for older persons. And it was so beautiful to see this conversation unfold with the collaboration of our older adults, because in Ecuador and Peru, it's a very taboo topic, similar to Nepal, where we can't necessarily talk about sexual health and older people. when you combine the two, people tend to frown upon it or look down upon it. But the reality is that sexual health doesn't just end once you reach a certain age. It's a lifelong journey. And as I mentioned, here are some photos of Argentina, so those have free activity. And another innovative thing that the government has done in Argentina is set up these healthy stations within parks. So for the most part, every local park has these healthy stations where you're able to get your blood pressure, blood sugar, and some nutritional advice. You just simply have to go in, you don't need an appointment, and yeah. This is Casa Mater, was the care home that I volunteered in, and this was the first care home in Argentina where I saw a care home being 10 stories tall, 20 stories tall, because beforehand in Ecuador and Peru, it was only one floor. It was a long, I would say, chunk of land, and if it wasn't, then it was 2 floors, but it was very accessible. I never saw or imagined a care home being 10 stories, but again, although it was 10 stories, it was creatively thought about how are we creating meaningful spaces within these care homes. So maybe in this care home, I can go outside. How are we creating a garden maybe within this care home so this person feels like they are able to go outside? Because here, they simply cannot go outside. You had to be in that floor for a long time. And it was interesting because I was like, this is different. But it was surprising to hear how some seniors appreciated that space. They would prefer to just be in one simple floor and not necessarily be able to go outside, etc. So again, there's diversity within the responses. And after Argentina, I went to Brazil. And here in Brazil, I was able to work and shadow within the hospital system in Las Hospitais de Clínicas de São Paulo. So here are some physicians that I was able to shadow, and it was incredible to hear, again, they had a sexuality clinic specifically for older persons, a dementia clinic, and every once a week, a doctor would spearhead this caregiving advice group for family members, and this was coming from the hospital. And this for me gave me so much hope, because when my mother and grandmother received their diagnosis, they were not, or my family did not receive support from the medical staff in terms of, what does this journey look like? In a way, we had to develop our own caregiving plan, our own ideas and whatnot. Another thing that I enjoyed about the hospital is that it focused not only on the medical side, but on the social side. So there was this program where seniors would come together, they would knit certain themes or do certain artworks together, but it was inside the hospital while they waited. And I think that was something very unique that I haven't seen in other countries, as well as thinking about how are we, yes, this is a hospital, but how are we reimagining these spaces to do something more meaningful? And here in Brazil is also the first time where I saw a different type of care where not only are we thinking about this care home, I'll play this video momentarily, but how are we thinking about creating this care home not only for the resident, but the family? So this care home specifically has meaningful spaces such as a pool, a tennis court, and a party room for the family of the senior. So how are families members being invited and motivated to come visit these spaces? Because typically when we think about a care home, we only think about the resident and we're not necessarily thinking about the well-being of the family as well. This care home is on the pricier side, but it's nonetheless interesting to see how important it is to have this collaboration within nature, thinking about how important nature is in terms of soothing people's ideas and emotions. And this is more of, I would say, like a hotel resort type of style senior living, but nonetheless provides those homes. This main floor is where most of the seniors who are dependent are, and then they have their own separate independent living quarters behind them. So here's like the pool that I mentioned and the court that they have for family members. So the family members felt very motivated to come and see what exactly is happening. Well, I'll continue. Yeah, so here you can see. again, thinking about these meaningful activities, how are we creating these certain spaces and creating these structures? You know, they're able to have animals. Typically when you enter a care home, they don't allow any sort of pets. At least in the other care homes I visited, they didn't allow any, but this one did. Thinking about how are we creating these spaces to actually be someone's home? How are we ensuring that they feel that this is their home and not just an institution? And this was also the first country where I didn't speak the language. I don't speak Portuguese. I speak a little bit now. It was also very difficult navigating those barriers. But seeing that we didn't necessarily need the same language to be able to communicate. All we needed was, touch, smiling, hand holding. That was very important. And it was very beautiful to be able to have done this with some residents, because sometimes that's all they need, someone to listen to them and spend time with them. So after Brazil, I guess here's some more photos of my time in Brazil. So here, before I continue talking about Costa Rica, which is the next country, in Brazil was also another country where I saw how they developed their own caregiving method or educational method. So when you were hired, this one of these care homes would actually retrain you about how we think you need to care for an older adult, and expose you to certain situations that you otherwise might have not been exposed to in your educational training. Hence, they had this like mannequin where they would do some, activities to ensure that the person was understanding who are they dealing with, etc. Additionally, the same, I would say, care home, they developed a activities plan from Sunday to Sunday. So every single day there was activities for our seniors to do. However, it was up to them. If they wanted to participate, they were able to. Otherwise, they were not obligated to do. But this was the first care home that I saw that actually had activities Sunday to Sunday, because typically people have it Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday, and they don't have the weekend off. But again, thinking about activities that seniors want to do, because one thing, for example, in Ecuador and Peru that I would often do, and in Argentina, was bingo. I personally don't like playing bingo, and when I'm older, I don't think I like playing bingo. And some of these seniors do not seem amused to be playing bingo. And another thing here in Brazil was the importance of inviting animals. So here they had some chickens and had a small little farm. So a lot of these people lived within these rural areas. So thinking about how are we bringing in certain animals that we see in our everyday life and are easy to handle. And here's a day center in Brazil that I appreciated because, again, this involvement within nature, but it was so important because it was within the community. So this day center was open for the community, and and they educated the members of how to, actively and healthily age together. So, in these previous. So here are some other photos of some people from my time in Costa Rica. This man is 100 years old, and he still rides his horse. And it was I loved my conversation with Mr. Ramiro, because he when I asked him, would you want to go into a care home? He laughed because he said, would I want to go into a care home? And I was like, oh, okay, thank you for the question. But what was really beautiful about this and his story was the fact that if he entered an institution, they wouldn't let him ride his horse because the institution might risk him falling. But what does it mean when somebody is choosing to, ride a horse or do something and the institution isn't allowing so? So it was incredible to see this. And to this day, he still goes out, collects his cows and all those types of things, despite his family being a bit worried, but it's what he really enjoyed doing. This woman here, she's 100 years old, and these are her 4 children. And she still lives high up in the mountains, no electricity, and there's some clean water, but it's still a pretty hard lifestyle. In order to get to her home, I had to cross a river, and there's a certain period of time where you're not able to cross that river because there's a lot of water. But what was interesting and beautiful about her story was the fact that if this woman was put in a care home, she probably wouldn't have reached the age of 100. Because the reality is, once you reach a care home, you're not necessarily being given the same attention that you had. and so forth. This is also another couple that I visited. He's 100 and she's 80, and they're still with their marriage. Except she's able to walk, he's no longer able to walk. But it was beautiful hearing their love story and hearing how they lived in this rural area, because sometimes it's a bit dangerous. There's some lions there, some wildlife. So I was like, wow, I don't necessarily know if I could live there. But it was beautiful hearing their stories and seeing how their family is supporting them. Because here in Costa Rica, for example, if I had 12 children and my 12 children decided not to take care of me, I had the legal authority to take them to court, so they could either give me money if they have money, and if not, give me their time, because they definitely have time to take care of me. And it was interesting because in the previous countries I traveled to, there was no such law. In the United States, that doesn't exist. There's no law for you to take your children to court. And then there was this little farm, or I would say not little, but larger farm here within a care home that had cows, deer, chickens, pigs, and they would use these animals to offset food costs. And it was very beautiful because there was some of these seniors that I met, they enjoyed having these animals. So thinking about how are we creating spaces for animals to offset our food costs for our seniors, and for them to also interact if they want to interact with the animals. This is one of the homes that I visited as well, where a centenarian lives. I'm talking to the daughter here, and it was so interesting. Again, thinking about structurally, people might say this is a terrible house, and although the structure probably wasn't the best, what was the best was the attention, love, and passion this child had for their family member. Another thing that I want to highlight is that none of these caregivers or family members received a formal educational training of what it means to care for an older person. All they received was their passion and what they knew how to do best. And it was interesting because what they were doing best is what we can learn as people from other countries. How are we ensuring we're being resilient and unlocking, I would say, this magic of love and kindness for our older persons? Because it was sometimes difficult, I would say. And I would say, for example, this mountain family surprised me specifically because there's no electricity. I grew up in a time, and probably some of you also grew up in a time where there wasn't, or I grew up in a time where there was electricity. You guys probably grew up in a time where there was or wasn't electricity, but I cannot imagine living there with no electricity. But these people wanted to live there. So again, thinking about how are we supporting them, or how is the government supporting them? Because like I mentioned, there's a certain period of time where there's a river that you can't cross, and if you can't cross, you can't give them food. There's another route that you could take, but it's going high up the mountain, and it's not the best route because it's very sunny and it's very hot, so you have to get a little dehydrated. And here's a video from Costa Rica that I wanted to highlight, that the municipality created this event where seniors, it's once a year, but seniors from the 5 different regions of this peninsula gather together to celebrate in community. And I thought this was a very creative idea of building community, but also showing the innovation of what older people are doing. So I'll play this video. So again, it was so beautiful seeing the seniors dance and seeing the creativity that they have. We just have to, again, give them the space and opportunity to see. And this was really funded by the municipality. So at the local level, that's the mayor over there. He was invested in the well-being of our seniors. Because the reality is that sometimes our families isn't taking care of us. And if they're not, how are we creating community within ourselves to ensure that there's community care? So after I went to Costa Rica, I was very amazed by these ideas of, aging in place, aging at home, and how in this case the government here, at least at the local level, is supporting this, but the centenarians that live in the mountains, it might be a bit difficult to do so. So after I visited Costa Rica, I decided not to come to Europe, so I started my travels off in Spain. And in Spain, I was fascinated because it was the first country that I traveled to where this word or idea, person-centered care started to arise, which is what I would say people all over the world are trying to do, or don't necessarily have the words and information to understand what exactly this means. But basically, how am I, as a caregiver or institution as well, ensuring that I understand this human being for who they are and supporting their way of aging the way they want to age? And I visited Spain because I was interested with this group called Dignified Care, or Fundación Cuidados Dignos, and they developed a care method without physical and chemical restraints. So as we know, previously in 2 decades ago, it was very common for an older person to be heavily sedated. Whenever you enter a hospital or a care home, there would be an older person heavily sedated and laying down in bed, because it was easier for the institution to care for their older person. And because of that, they developed this care without physical and chemical restraints to help empower the care team and teach them methods that an older person doesn't need to be given antipsychotics or heavily or lots of powerful drugs to sedate them, but understand how are we able to empower them and listen to them and open up our space to ensure we are not giving them too many medicines that they might not necessarily need. Additionally, there was also this other method called the 𝐈𝐧𝐬 method, and I really appreciated this. She's the founder, Carol, and I really appreciated this method because it really listens to the person. If I want to do this, I'm told, okay, let's try to see if we can do it. And I'm not told necessarily no. I'm respected and my wishes are heard. And another thing about Spain that I really enjoyed was how seniors were actively participating within society. So for example, this grocery store had built a small little elevator, I would call it, to lift up the basket so this older person can pick up his groceries and place it on the bell of where the groceries have to go. So again, thinking about how is our society creating spaces for older people to participate. Here, for example, again, some older persons, there was a dog and they were all talking and petting. They did not know one another. They simply were building community, but it was beautiful to see how the society created this space for them to be able to be there. And another thing here in Spain where I focus a bit more on technological uses. So Stefan, the founder and creator of this technological suit, he allowed me to try the suit on that's able to complement caregiving training courses, because sometimes caregivers or care staff might say they understand something, but they really don't understand it until they experience it. And what I mean by that, for example, these are some sunglasses that if I put on, it limits my view of vision. So for example, as I'm looking straight ahead, I see my phone is here, I see that the chair is here, and this is something else for my book bag. But when I get older, I might no longer be able to see all these things around me. I might only be able to see simply there. And it's interesting because whenever we enter a care home, at least typically what I've seen is whenever people are getting ready to eat, you are always pushed close to the table. And as an older person, I might no longer see that my plate's in front of me. I might physically need the plate to be there or my chair to be pushed aside. But as someone who's able to see 360, I don't necessarily think about that. So it's interesting thinking about how are we using technology like this to better build and create more empathy to our care training staff. And another important thing about Spain was this group called Cuidando de Ti, or taking care of you. So how are we taking care of the caregiver and ensuring that the caregiver feels supported along their journey? Because the reality is that if the caregiver isn't being taken care of, they will eventually or potentially get sick. So again, doing that preventative work. So another thing about Spain that I enjoyed was this age-friendly park that I haven't seen in any of my other countries that I traveled to. Here in Nepal, I have seen this, but I was very excited to see this because this is the first time in my travels where I've seen now meaningful spaces built by the government for older persons, because we value children, which I'm not saying that we shouldn't, I think we should, but thinking about how are we co-creating spaces for both children and older adults. And there were some signs here so people are able to understand, you know, what they can do and cannot do. I really enjoyed the simple lunch, so you're able to like pedal, bicycle, and build up, you know, some exercising things that you're able to do there, and it's all for free. You just have to go. Okay, so I want to show this video. It's in Spanish, but I'm going to put subtitles in English so you all are able to read it. But this model of care, or ideal model of care in Spain, was so, I would say, provocative, and for me, it deeply touched me because it's the first time where seniors were fully and authentically heard.
Es curioso, te haces mayor y de repente el mundo te hace sentir más pequeño que nunca. Vamos a la camita, bebe agüita, vamos a cortarte el pelito, ponte las gafitas. ¿Hola? Nah, esto no es para ti. Tú no has llegado hasta aquí viviendo una vida pequeña y no vas a empezar a hacerlo ahora. Por eso en Gran Edad queremos proponerte algo. Bueno, más que proponértelo, decírtelo, gritártelo. Ahí va. Vive grande. Desde que te levantes hasta que te acuestes. Sea la hora que sea, porque vivir grande va de eso. De decidir. Vivir grande es hacer lo que te apetezca. Un bizcocho, trampas al dominó. Es ir en bici, fumarte un puro, perder la vergüenza. Vive grande. Haz yoga, písate las uñas, tómate un vermut, pasea por el bosque, haz amigos, enamórate, siéntete en familia, lee libros, lee lo que quieras. Vive grande, porque la vida es lo más grande que tenemos.
So I showed this video to highlight the fact that these people and older adults are able to do what they want. It's very different from any culture or other, you know, countries, but they are truly trying to create a space where we're listening to our seniors. For example, this woman is riding a motorcycle, which some people might say like, that is insane, you shouldn't do that. But if the person decides to do this, how are we empowering them? As we saw, somebody was smoking a cigarette, was drinking alcohol. If our seniors decide to do this, how are we empowering them, their journey, or how are we creating that balance between risk and reward? I think it's so important. And for me, this was very provocative because you're trying to live a grand life. Just because I reach a certain age doesn't mean that it should limit me from eating my sweets. If for example, some of these centenarians in Costa Rica still drink alcohol, very little bit, but they drink some alcohol. And it's because, you know, once you reach a certain age, if it hasn't done harm to you, it's not going to do harm to you. So thinking about, you know, how are we creating these spaces? And what I appreciated about them is, for example, this one older person was swinging. I know as an older person, I might want to be able to do that. So again, how are we empowering and creating these spaces for these older persons to live their grand and luxurious life the way they want to live their older lives? So after Spain, I went to France. So this concept of dementia villages is coming up often and often around the world. I was fortunate enough 5 years ago to visit 𝐾𝐿, the first and original dementia village. And here, all of the residents have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or some type of dementia. However, they are able to roam around freely throughout this entire space. They live in groups of 7 to 8 residents per home. There's a specific lifestyle, and it's a very interesting concept because it mimics society. So yes, you're in a nursing home, but you're able to go to the grocery store, movie theater, get your hair done. But what's very common is that in each of these homes, there's a dining room and living room. So structurally, there's important spaces to have in order to ensure that we are providing a space for older persons to age with dignity and kindness. And what I really appreciated about here, when I visited, for example, I remember it was a little chilly, but there was an older woman who was outside and she was clearly lost. However, we were able to redirect her to her home. It was beautiful to see that because in a typical care home, she wouldn't have been lost. She would have been locked inside the institution, not able to go outside, not able to feel the warm or cold weather in this case. Here's a video of like some of the spaces that I'll show.
It is the south of village for people with Alzheimer's disease in southwestern France. It's a gated community where all 105 residents have a progressive brain disorder. There's a cafeteria, a library, groceries, and a hair salon for pampering sessions. There are no nurses in white coats, but the village does come with the care of a nursing home. Researchers are paying close attention, hoping to find out whether this model for living can alter the clinical trajectory of the disease, while also offering value for money. 82-year-old Madeleine Elisal was one of the first ones to move in when the village opened in June.
I am very well here. They take good care of us. We eat well. It's as if we were at home.
After her diagnosis, she lived with her daughter before moving in with another of her children. But the disruption seemed to worsen memory loss, according to the family. Now, she has a daily routine in the village. That might just be helping to slowly advance.
So that's like the dining
Her
area.
granddaughter said she has found her love of life back. Each resident pays over $28,000 a year in fees, with more than half the almost $8 million total running costs being subsidized by the French authorities.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, this idea was just really interesting because also within the main center, the downtown area, seniors decide to go there if they want or not go, and there's activities that are happening there simultaneously happening within their own home as well. And what I really enjoyed was this idea of the libraries that they mentioned. So this care home has a library that's open not only for the residents, but also the community. So this institution isn't closed off to community, but invites community to come in, understand what's happening, and I really enjoy that because I think it'll improve the well-being of the community, but also emphasize the importance of taking care of your elders. But beyond that, if your grandparents or parents have some type of memory loss, you know who to rely on. And additionally, they have also a medical center there as well, where you get like the dentist and those types of things as well for the community. It's just as important for the residents, but also the community. And that's very interesting because I haven't seen that in other countries that I visited where they are also making sure that our seniors are there and are collaborating with community members. So after France, I went to Germany. And in Germany, again, I was so fascinated by the work that they're doing because here they created their own diversity seal for LGBTI seniors, so LGBTI housing projects. And here it was so important because thinking about diversity, inclusion, and how are we training our care staff to be sensitive to these topics. Germany is also, I would say, a country that I visited that has a very international presence. And what I mean by that, there was a lot of people from Turkey, Poland, and other types of countries living there, but they did not resonate with the German culture. And what was very, I would say, fascinating was seeing how there was a care home that was opened up for the Turkish community because of the large population that are there. And it was supported by the German government and those types of things. But again, how are we ensuring that we're understanding one's culture and respecting it and bringing it in within this care home? And specifically speaking for the LGBTI housing project, what I found very interesting with that model of care is that there was 8 residents living in a care home. And when one of them passed, so if there were 7 residents, the other person who will fill that place in or be there would be somebody that the group of 7 other men decided on. So we would basically interview and see how we deal with this new resident and allow them in. And it was interesting because again, now we are asking our seniors, do you think this person will be a good fit? Do you not think this person will be a good fit? But thinking about how are we creating community within, because sometimes within care homes there is sometimes there's arguments and fights because some seniors don't get along, etc. But that was very interesting. And what really impressed me with the diversity seal that they created was that now we are ensuring that our care staff are sensitive to this information. Because, for example, in Latin America, this type of conversation does not occur. It's very taboo. It's still relatively a new idea. But it's important that we have these conversations because regardless, an older person should feel safe to be who they are. And one thing that has occurred when somebody receives a diagnosis of dementia is, for example, if a man is married with a woman, as he's progressing along his dementia journey, he might come out as being part of the LGBTI community. So what does that mean for the doctor? What does that mean for the family? What does that mean for the caregiver? And ensuring that they are supporting this person with their newfound identity, etc. And in Germany, I also visited this small little neighborhood called Arnsberg, or city. It's a very age-friendly city, and I really enjoyed it because these seniors here, this is a project funded by the local level, the municipality, but these seniors are basically bicycling people around, are very active. Here, I was meeting with the boards, I guess the editorial board of the local senior newspaper. So they received over 200 submissions from seniors within Arnsberg, and basically create a small little booklet to give to older persons, delivered for free and so forth. Another thing about Germany is the use of technology. So I met with this group where they believe in digitalizing the floor. So how are we able to use sensors to respect someone's privacy? Across these different countries, I saw cameras used, I didn't see cameras used, but this notion of privacy was very paramount above all these different countries. I also don't speak any German, so it was very difficult to be there. I'm trying to navigate things, but again, just because you don't speak the language, you're still able to do certain things that are universal. Here, I was giving somebody a hand massage, and it was incredible to hear from the director. Simply giving them this hand massage, they saw their residents, in a way, come back to life, be able to be happy, find joy within that moment. I'll never forget this one person who was very like, wow, wow, that's all she knew how to say in English, and that's typically what I say in English, and it was very funny being able to just say, wow, wow, as we were holding each other's hands, massaging each other's hands, and creating space, because again, sometimes it's not able to occur because of the size and demand that there is. So in summary, from these travels I went through, I see that we need more family support is needed, educationally, economically, emotionally. Care facilities need further audits, thinking about what the state requires, but thinking about auditing the model of care, staff support, as well as community support for care homes, and specifically creating a guide of what exactly we should all be striving for, and training our care staff, so dementia care, but beyond dementia care, thinking about cultural and inclusive formations for our staff, because sometimes people are not able to understand. One thing, for example, that I want to highlight about Germany is that when I entered some of these care homes, it was very clear that these foreign care staff workers were not aware of the tragedies of World War II. And because of that, they didn't necessarily understand some of these seniors at their cultural level and historical level, which is very important for providing those types of care, that type of care in Germany. And now, next week, I'll be going to Porpora, and after Porpora, I'll be in Australia, and then I'll be back in the United States in July 2023. And here's some pictures from Nepal, some people that I was able to visit. I really enjoy being here in this country, in Nepal. I really appreciate you all for being here, because I think Nepal has so much to offer to other countries in terms of understanding how it's okay to be simple, it's okay to understand a person for who they are, and just understanding how different the culture is here in Nepal, because I haven't been a place like this before, but I really, really appreciated it being here and going to different events. Dhanyavad. Thank you.
So हाम्रो लुईको प्रेजेन्टेसन चाहिँ सकेको छ। केही क्वेसन्सहरु छ हजुरको? विवेकको? ल, what's your question? Yes, Vivek. Yeah, Luis, thank you for the photo. My kids are visible.
But people
Very much visible.
She's very happy.
I also created some papers if you guys want to see.
No, Vivek.
Yeah, Vivek, you can ask a question.
So, hello, my name is Vivek Mandari, and I am currently pursuing Bachelor in Community Development in Kathmandu University. So, regarding today's session, I have one question. So, how has this international research experience impacted your perspective on aging, caregiving, regarding the elderly care sector?
Yeah, so I think some countries are doing better than others in terms of caregiving for their seniors. It's clear that we need more information that we should all be following or sharing these ideas, because it's very clear that our culture influences the outcomes of our care. For example, in some cultures, it's not very common to do certain things. For example, here in Nepal, you're able to easily eat with your hand. And I really enjoy that, because in these other countries that I travel to, when somebody has dementia and tries to eat with their hand, they are typically told no and are given a spoon or something, but they're eating with their hand. But it's very stigmatized within these other countries. So, how are we normalizing certain behaviors and learning from each other? It's definitely just given me a more cultural awareness of these different countries in terms of caregiving and supporting families and so forth.
अरू कसैको केही प्रश्न छ?
Okay, so my question is, what motivated you to include Nepal as one of the countries to visit during your research?
Yeah, so
Yes, we had asked him the same question.
yeah, so I honestly, growing up in the United States, I not learned much about Nepal. I didn't learn anything actually. But when I was thinking about, going to different countries, being able to understand what's happening, I was very interested in going to a country that I had no idea about. And that was, one of those countries was Nepal. Specifically though, what really interested me about Nepal is the fact that there's only 6 geriatricians here. So the fact that there isn't that many doctors that are specialized within older age fascinated me. And I also just wanted to learn a different culture, because I know nothing about this part of the world and so forth. So just, new culture and the lack of doctors in the field of geriatrics.
Actually, you said, thank you for all the presentation, that's marvelous. And one thing, which countries that children are, if you abandon your mom and dad, then...
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. What's the law in there?
Yeah, so it's to emphasize, for example, family members who care for their older adults, but there's a law specifically, I didn't put it on there, but it's basically saying, if you have, for example, in this case, if I have 12 children, one of those 12 children has to be responsible for taking care of me. If they don't, I have the legal authority to take them to court. However, that isn't typically done because family ties is very important and no older person wants to take them to court. But there's been some tragic stories. For example, some of the centenarians that I showed, some of those centenarians, for example, I would say are not necessarily taking care of their children, but yet their homes are going to go to one of their children because prior, when the centenarian was much younger, the child made them sign certain things, etc. So that law, for example, is there to try to help combat that and instill families to take care of their older person. And it's similar like that in Germany, except in Germany you need to actually pay. So you can't you can take them to court, but you need to basically it's for them to pay for your senior living. But in Germany, there's a law where there's that law, but there's also a law where you're able to, if they weren't a good parent, then you're able to say that as a justification and you don't have to pay. But in different countries, there is no law saying that your children are responsible. In the United States, there's no law that's tying me to my grandparents or parents at all.
But actually, I'm thinking, what sort of punishment was there?
And it's probably just a fine. It's just a fine, probably. Just a large sum of money, yeah.
If they don't want to give the fine, then?
I guess jail. But I'm excited for next week to go to Pocoda, because in Pocoda I'll be visiting the residential home that was built by the UK government, and I think that is very interesting, where you see Western geriatric care with Eastern philosophy of care. So I'm very interested to see that, because here in Kathmandu, the care homes I visited are quite different from that.
So they are ex-Englishmen.
I was there when they started.
We both.
Yeah, we were-
टमको रहेछ
Just Bokara, yeah. I hope to be back in Nepal in the near future. I think like I was saying, here in Nepal it's such a different culture, but I think it's very important to share the information between countries, but also to ensure that we are striving best for our seniors around the world. Because we're all going to get older and older. It's just a matter of fact, where in the world are we going to get older and older?
केही क्वेसन्सहरु छ
Yeah, so in total, I would visit 10 countries. I originally proposed 5 countries, but because of meeting different people and talking to people, I ended up going to 10 countries. I was hoping to go to like Malaysia and Japan, but because of time and financial stuff, I won't be able to do those, travel to those countries. But here's I guess you can see. These are all the countries I would have been able to visit. The ones marked in red are the original 5 countries I proposed. So I added Ecuador, Argentina, Costa Rica, Spain, and Peru.
Another question. You said that some of them, the elderly home, they had grocery. What they used to buy in the grocery?
So basically simple things that they would make for lunch or dinner. So, milk, eggs, bread, like stuff like that they'll be able to cook together and create within their care homes.
I think they used to buy and they used to cook themselves or something?
So they would be assisted, yes, they would be assisted to cook those meals. So for example, in France, we would basically go into the grocery store, basically the care home bought these groceries and then put it within the store, and then you would go with the cart and with a caregiver to go buy certain groceries, and then you would bring it back to your home and cook that for lunch or dinner.
Why they do that?
To mimic real society. So there's this move to reimagine these care homes into like, yes, it's an institution, but I need to be still part of society. I should be able to, go outside. In a way, it motivates somebody to go outside. Because typically when you're in a care home, you're just in bed or in a floor, you're not really moving around. But this motivates you to go, outside to explore, catch some air. Let's see. Yeah, so here, for example, in Spain, like I was saying, you're able to go walk around and see what exactly is happening, because this is the main area. But even then, in some of these other care homes I visited, there always tends to be like a small little store as well to buy certain like sweets, if you want to buy sweets, or want a new hat, stuff like that. Like this idea of how are we reimagining a certain space to mimic society. Because it's very important to really try to reimagine. For example, if I'm in this room, I go and stay in this room, maybe that side I could make a little garden, maybe that side I could make a little kitchen, but thinking about how do we reimagine these spaces. Because a lot of people say like, no, this room can only be a bedroom. But no, this room can be a bedroom, but it could also be a bunch of other things. It just takes creativity and the time that sometimes these institutions tend not to have or don't want to do, because it is hard to create it. But I think once the administration or management teams is on board, it's easier to create those changes within the care home. But it's very important to ensure this institution mimics society at the end of the day.
One question. Do you think that it is better for the old people to go to the old age home rather than to stay with the family?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. I think that it really depends in the sense that I think there's a certain point where the family member is no longer able to care for their loved one. And what I mean by that is that if the family member is burnt out or fatigued, they no longer have the time or energy to do so, then maybe they should consider being in a care home. Secondly, if the person has the educational information, I think it's important. For example, like in my case, taking care of my grandma and mother, I never received adequate training to be a caregiver, but I was very curious. So So in a way, I developed my own skills to not be burned out and to, when there was hard days, thinking about, yes, this is a hard day, but the love and compassion I'm showing outweighs that hardness. But if I didn't feel that I had that love and compassion, or resiliency rather, then it might have been a better option for them to be in an institution. I would say in Costa Rica, and I mean, I'm still a little bit iffy with that answer, because in Costa Rica, the centenarians and their families made it very clear to me, a care home is never the answer. But for them, the reason it was never an answer was because it was a cultural thing. But beyond that, it's because they felt very empowered. They felt that they could do it to the very end. But sometimes, for example, if I need to be lifted up, but I'm on the heavier side, sometimes in my home, I might not have the equipment to do so. One important thing is also the bathroom. If the bathroom isn't age-friendly within my home, and I'm not taking care of, if I'm not showering my older person, that's going to impact their health. So in that case, it's clear I need to be in a old age home where they have an accessible bathroom and they're able to easily shower my family member. But I think there is a certain point where if it becomes too much, if you're being burnt out, then we should look into going into an old age home. But I definitely think that if you want to live at home, you should be able to and empowered to. And that's why it intrigues me understanding how is the government supporting these people. Because in Costa Rica, for example, those families, no one was supporting those families. But in Germany, what I really appreciate about that small town is that at the local level, that person, Martin, for example, he's hoping to visit every person and do future plans. But as soon as you turn 80 years old, and prior to that, he's hoping to go to people's homes to inform them of the services that the municipality offers, so this older person can age at home. So I would say stay at home, but it all depends of the training and resources available.
Hello, my name is Mitra Gidde. So my question to you is, what inspired you to pursue Bachelor in Neuroscience? Because I'm also interested in neuroscience, but I do not.
Nice, yeah. So I'm interested in neuroscience because of the mix of psychology and biology. And growing up, as I mentioned, my mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia and later diagnosed with younger onset dementia. And my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So I was always fascinated about the brain and central nervous system and understanding these diseases and what exactly is happening at the biological level. So because of that, I pursued a bachelor's in neuroscience to educate myself more of what is happening at the brain, what can we do to prevent certain things, and simply just to learn. So I was very curious, yes.
So you said pure science?
Neuroscience.
Neuroscience.
Yeah. So the study of the brain and central nervous system.
You need to do a little bit surgery or?
Oh, I did I guess with the rats, yeah. With rats. With labs, yeah. Not my favorite model organism to work with. Yeah. My hope is with all of this information, once I return to my country, I'll be doing clinical research related to Alzheimer's disease. And then I would pursue, I was fortunate enough to receive a scholarship to pursue a master's in public health focused on population aging. And after that, I will hopefully become a doctor for older persons. So I want to become a geriatrician because I'm very interested with aging and changing what it means to age within the United States. Because for people like me who come from Latin America, there's barriers to information and it's difficult for somebody to age. And I want to make sure that people get the resources that I never received and are going through the same journey that I went through.
You might have seen many good things in this country. And is there anything you suggest for us which you haven't seen here? And is that economical, financial, and culturally suitable for Europe?
Yeah, I would say I think something that's very important about Nepal. I think one thing that has really surprised me about Nepal is the infrastructure. And I mean that's a huge problem to tackle, but it does surprise me that there's no clear sidewalk. And what I mean by that is if I'm an older person who's wheelchair bound, I simply cannot go outside by myself. I need somebody to help me. And if I go outside by myself, it makes it's going to be difficult. Like I need to be mentally, physically prepared to struggle because the way the infrastructure is, it's not built for older persons. But one thing I would say that I've seen in 𝐾𝐿 was building more community events. So maybe each of these municipalities or neighborhoods, maybe there is a certain, older person that's in charge or community member in charge of creating community with one another. So I think it's something that you're able to easily do. But I've seen that in 𝐾𝐿, but I think having it in other places in Nepal, here in Avenue, would help a lot person know what's going on, as well as using social media. I think that's something that across the board here in the public kids use, is using social media to make other people aware. In Argentina, for example, all those governmental or the plaza, the day centers at the federal level, or specifically in the capital city, they had an Instagram page where they would post all that information saying like, today is Wednesday, these centers are open, these activities are going on, come join us. So maybe using social media as well to inform other people about what exactly is happening. So I guess that the use of social media, more community building events, and then the infrastructure. I guess
अरू कसैको के प्रश्न छ हाम्रो रुईलाई? हाम्रो आलु 𝐾𝐿बाट जेनी म्याम र अब निपना म्याम त रुईसँग धेरै बस्नु भएको छ नि त। हजुरको केही विशेष टिप्पणी, दुई छोटो मिठो शब्द। अनि हाम्रो गणेश सर र राजा म्याम पनि, सिन्स अब हजुरले त अब एउटा ओल्ड एज केयर होम नै हेरिराख्नु भएको छ नि त, सो हजुरहरू तीनजनाकोबाट के जाओस् न, छोटो मिठो समरी नेपालको कन्टेक्स्टमा उहाँको प्रेजेन्टेसन पनि हेरेर होइन। सो उहाँहरू चारजनाको बारेमा भनिदिइहाल्छ हाम्रो मेम्बरहरूलाई। उहाँहरू हाम्रो आलु 𝐾𝐿बाट त जेनी म्याम र निर्मला म्याम त हजुरले चिन्नुहुन्छ होइन। सो यतापट्टि हाम्रो गणेश सर हुनुहुन्छ। अस्ति हाम्रो गणेश सर उहाँ भेट्नु पनि भयो होला हरि अङ्कलहरूले त होइन, उहाँ हाम्रो ट्रिपमा जानु हुँदाखेरि। अनि अर्को चाहिँ हाम्रो मुदिताबाट हुनुहुन्छ राजा लक्ष्मी म्याम। सो उहाँहरू चारजना चाहिँ हाम्रो नेपालको यो नेपाल एज केयर होम क्रिएसनमा पनि आबद्ध हुनुहुन्छ, यो फेज 2 मा पनि होइन। उहाँहरू सर्टिफाइड पनि भइसक्नु भयो बिहानी थ्रुबाट पनि। सो त्यही भएर चाहिँ हजुरहरू चारजना चाहिँ धेरै यो सेटिङमा काम गरिसक्नु भएको छ। हजुरहरूलाई बेसिक नलेज बेसिक भन्दा पनि मोर एडभान्स नै छ होइन। सो हजुरहरूकोबाट छोटो मिठो केही जाओस् न। को सुरु गर्नुहुन्छ पहिला? राजा म्याम सुरु गर्नुहुन्छ कि? उहाँले यस्तो गर्दै हुन्छ हजुरहरू।
अस्ति पनि हेरेको छ होइन, हामीले त प्रेजेन्टेसन लुइसको उता पनि सुनिसकेका हो होइन। हामी फेरि प्राइभेट सेक्टरमा पनि गयौँ फेरि होइन, गभर्मेन्ट र प्राइभेटको कति कुराहरू यस्तो छ के अरे,
इङ्ग्लिसबाट भन्दा नि हुन्छ।
म त्यस्तो राम्रो छैन नि त इङ्ग्लिसमा फेरि।
सरी एकछिन जेनी म्याम दिनेशको
If you have been there, so many countries, like 10 countries, all of these old age homes run by the charity or by the government?
It's a mixture of who I connect with and who allow me to mentor. So it's been of the government, of charities, and then private sectors. Yeah, but I tried to go to an array of those services to understand a bit more of what's happening. And just because you're in a private care home, there's this conception that if you're in a private care home, you're receiving the best care. That's not the case. I've seen some of these public institutions run by charities providing high quality care, and I refer to like my time in Brazil, because there was this one public institution that provided, I would say, very top tier care compared to some other private institutions that I saw.
म चाहिँ अरू कुरा भन्दा पनि लुइस चाहिँ कसरी हामीसँग कनेक्ट भयो भन्ने कुरामा चाहिँ अलिकति जोड्न खोजेँ होइन। फर्स्टमा चाहिँ लुइसले चाहिँ उता एजिङ नेपाललाई चाहिँ प्रपोज गर्नुभएको छ कि म चाहिँ यसरी यो विषयमा पढिरहेको छु, विभिन्न देशमा गइरहेको छु, मलाई चाहिँ नेपालको बारेमा पनि बुझ्नु छ, जान्नु छ भनेर उहाँले धेरैजनालाई इमेल पठाउँदाखेरि चाहिँ सायद धेरै ठाउँबाट रेस्पोन्स आएन। नआएपछि चाहिँ मलाई चाहिँ एजिङ नेपालले फरवर्ड गर्नुभएको थियो। अनि फरवर्ड गरेपछि उहाँको जुन डकुमेन्टेसन देखेँ, आइ एम सो इन्ट्रेस्टेड के। अनि कसैले नेपालको एजिङ रिलेटेड इस्युमा कुरा गर्छ भने वाइ नट भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ मैले चाहिँ यसलाई चाहिँ यु क्यान कन्टिन्यू लाइक इन्टर्न इन माई अर्गनाइजेसन भनेर मैले चाहिँ ओके गरेँ। अनि हामीसँग 2-3 चरणमा कुरा भयो। अनि कुरा भइसकेपछि चाहिँ आरोपीले उहाँलाई रिसिभ गरे पनि मेरो चाहना चाहिँ उहाँलाई सबैसम्म धेरै नेटवर्कसँग कोअर्डिनेट गराइदिउँ, ताकि नेपालको कन्टेक्समा चाहिँ उसले धेरैभन्दा धेरै कुरा चाहिँ बुझेर जाओस् भन्ने सोचले चाहिँ हामीले एक्सेप्ट गऱ्यौँ। अनि उहाँ आइसकेपछि आएको 2 दिनमा चाहिँ उहाँले हामीलाई चाहिँ उहाँको प्रोग्रामको बारेमा बताउनु भयो, कसरी काम गर्नुभएको छ, कुन कुन ठाउँमा गएँ, कस्तो एक्सपिरियन्स भयो भन्ने भइसकेपछि मैले चाहिँ के भन्नु भने त्यसो भए मेरो जिम्मेवारी भयो, म तिमीलाई चाहिँ यहाँको नेटवर्कहरूसँग चाहिँ भेटाइदिन्छु भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ मैले चाहिँ जेरियाट्रिक सोसाइटीको प्रोग्रामहरू, एजिङ नेपालको प्रोग्राम र बिहानीलाई पनि यसरी छ तिमी अप्रोच गर भनेर, प्लस मैले पनि बिहानी म्यामहरूलाई चाहिँ यस्तो छ है, लुइस आइराख्नु भएको छ, उहाँ चाहिँ नेपालको बारेमा जान्न चाहनुहुन्छ भनेर गरेको भएर अनि धेरै ठाउँमा चाहिँ हामी मैले भेट्न र मिल्नेसम्ममा चाहिँ उहाँलाई सँगसँगै लिएर पनि गएँ होइन। अनि उहाँले चाहिँ आफै पनि एकदम इफोर्ट लगाइराख्नु भएको छ क्या धेरै ठाउँमा जानलाई, जस्तै सहारा भक्तपुरमा गइसक्नुभयो होइन। अनि त्यसपछि हाम्रो यो 𝐾𝐿को ज्येष्ठ नागरिक चौतारीहरू होइन, उहाँले चाहिँ आफै इनिसिएसन लिएर हिँडिराख्नु भएको छ कि जुन कुरा चाहिँ हामीले कोअर्डिनेट गरिदिन पायो भने उहाँलाई अझ धेरै नलेज हुन्थ्यो नेपालमा के भइरहेछ र अरू कन्ट्री र नेपालमा के डिफ्रेन्सेस रहेछ भनेर उहाँले पछि प्रेजेन्ट गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो अवस्था यहाँ रहेछ भने चाहिँ हामीले थाहा पाउनलाई सजिलो हुन्छ भनेर अब उहाँले इन्ट्रेस्ट देखाएको भएर नै एक्सेप्ट गरे हो। अनि उहाँले चाहिँ बेस चाहिँ आरोपी केयर माने पनि, तर उहाँ चाहिँ धेरै आफ्नो प्लान गरेर हिँडिराख्नु भएको छ। सम्भवतः पोखराबाट फर्केपछि लास्ट एकचोटि आरोपीमा प्रेजेन्ट गर्नुहुन्छ कि ले चाहिँ डिस्कस चाहिँ गरेको छैन त्यसरी छ। अनि मैले चाहिँ त्यतिखेर डोटे म्यामको बारेमा पनि भनेको थिएँ कि दिनेश सर, डोटे म्यामको बारेमा पनि उहाँलाई इन्फर्मेसन दिएको थिएँ, तर डोटे म्याम हुनुहुन्न भन्ने भयो नि त। अनि त्यसपछि त्यसरी गरेको छ, हामीसँग भएको इन्फर्मेसन उहाँलाई दिएको छौँ। अनि उहाँले आफ्नै पनि तरिकाले विभिन्न ठाउँमा गएर हेरिराख्नु भएको छ। सो कम्पेरिटिभ स्टडी भयो भने उहाँले अझ बेटर नेपाललाई बुझ्नुहुन्छ र हामीलाई पनि त्यो सिकाइ चाहिँ उहाँले अझ सेयर गर्नुहुन्छ भनेर नै। Thank you so much.
At very young age, he's just 22. At very young age, he's traveled more than 10 countries, you know. So it's really fascinating and it's really inspiring as a Nepali student for us, you know. So that's what motivated me. So thank you so much, Luis. So this is Ganesh sir.
Can we take a picture? Can we take a picture? Can you take a picture of us?
Yeah, we'll take a group photo at last. So Ganesh sir, you'll get another picture from me. Okay, भन्न चाहनुहुन्छ? राजा मैम, ठीक छ? You need this questionnaire. So
one thing and the case of this and one thing.
I should say that. Wait, comparing it to Nepal or is it general? I would say
So, सबैजनालाई चाहिँ
wait, you're in Nepal.
Luis, so we'll be ending the session now.
उहाँले के क्वेसन
Question हो रहेछ भन्नुस् न।
I would say I think Argentina in terms of like the fast use of like social media and really inviting I say community, you know, being worried about that. So I would, for me, Argentina did a really good job of just spearheading things at the federal level. It could obviously be improved upon outside of the capital city, but I think they are doing some really important work that we can learn from around the world. In terms of the words, I can't necessarily think of one country or thing. I think we're all struggling. We still need to, you know, although Argentina is ahead of certain things, I think we're all struggling in certain regards that we have to improve. I would say, in terms of, maybe the worst thing I would say is understanding the cultural diversity that exists within each of our countries, not only based on like culture, but also someone's sexual identity, etc. Like making sure that we are having these conversations about I think that's amazing across all the countries are doing some better than others, but are still doing it.
थाहा त हाम्रोमा पनि आन्टी हामी हजुरले रेलकोट उडाएर लगिन्छ